Hey friends, tonight we're drifting back through time to the life of night watchmen in old London. We often imagine the past as a place of constant darkness and danger, yet the reality was a complex web of community vigilance and quiet routine. Modern assumptions suggest that nighttime was strictly for sleeping, but in the 17th century the night was a working shift for many who kept the city safe. We also assume that silence meant emptiness, that the silence of the past was filled with the subtle sounds of life continuing in the shadows. Before we fully relax, gently tap that new YouTube hype button if you feel like helping small storytellers like me. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy this calm corner of historical tales. Leave a comment with your city and local time. It is comforting to know who else is traveling back in time alongside us. Now, settle in, let your thoughts soften, and together we will wander into the quiet echoes of the past. The cobblestones of the street were slick with evening mist as the watchman began his round. He pulled the collar of his heavy wool coat up against the chill that seeped from the ground. The air smelled of damp earth and coal smoke, a scent that clung to the buildings like a second skin. Above him, the sky was a deep indigo devoid of the electric glow that defines modern cities. Only the moon and the stars provided light, casting long shadows that stretched across the narrow lanes. In his hand he held a lantern with a flickering candle inside, the glass clouded with age. The flame danced with every step he took, illuminating the path just a few feet ahead. He walked slowly, his boots making a soft clacking sound against the stone. The city around him was mostly asleep, but he knew that sleep was not universal. Behind the closed shutters of the houses, families rested in warm beds, unaware of the figure pacing outside their doors. He carried the weight of their safety on his shoulders, a responsibility that was both heavy and honorable. The key to the church gate hung from his belt, swinging gently with his movement. It was a symbol of his authority, though he wielded it with quiet humility. He stopped at a corner, listening to the wind rustle through the bare branches of the trees. There was no traffic, no engines, only the natural sounds of the night. A dog barked in the distance, a lonely sound that echoed off the brick walls. He noted the sound in his mind, marking it as normal, nothing to be concerned about. His job was to distinguish between the ordinary noises of the night and the signs of trouble. It required a patience the modern life rarely demands, a stillness of spirit as much as body. He moved on, turning down a narrower alley where the shadows were deeper. The buildings here leaned toward each other, almost touching at the roofs. He raised the lantern higher, checking the darkness for any movement. The light caught the dust motes swirling in the air, tiny stars in their own right. He felt a sense of peace in this solitude, a connection to the city that few others shared. While the world dreamed, he was awake, guarding the boundary between safety and chaos. The cold bit at his fingers, but he kept his grip firm on the lantern handle. He knew the route by heart, every stone and every crack in the wall. There was comfort in the familiarity, a rhythm to the patrol that soothed his mind. He paused again, this time to check the lock on a merchant's door. It was secure as he expected it to be. He touched the iron briefly, feeling the cold metal against his glove. Satisfied, he continued walking, the lantern swinging gently at his side. The night was young, and there were many hours left to cover. The silence wrapped around him like a cloak, heavy and protective. He was alone, yet he felt part of something larger, a chain of watches stretching back through history. The heavy iron key in his pocket felt cold against his thigh. The heavy iron key in his pocket felt cold against his thigh as he continued down the lane. The metal weighed him down slightly, a constant reminder of the trust placed in his hands. He passed the bakery, where the ovens were already being stoked for the morning bread. The smell of yeast and burning wood drifted out through the cracks in the shutters. It was a warm scent, contrasting sharply with the crisp cold of the street. He nodded to the baker, who was visible through the glass, a silent acknowledgement of shared labor. They were both workers of the night, though their tasks were different. The baker created sustenance, while the watchman created safety. Both were essential for the city to function when the sun rose. He walked past the shop, the light from the oven fading behind him. The street opened up into a small square, dominated by a stone fountain. The water was still, frozen in a thin layer of ice that glinted in the moonlight. He stopped to listen to the silence of the square, checking for any disturbance. Nothing moved, except the shadow of a cat slipping along the wall. The animal paused to look at him, its eyes reflecting the lantern light like gems. Then it vanished into the darkness, silent as smoke. He resumed his walk, his breath visible in the air before him. The cold was penetrating now, finding its way through the layers of his coat. He rubbed his hands together, generating friction to keep the blood flowing. The lantern flame flickered violently in the gust, but it did not go out. He shielded it with his body, protecting the light from the wind. Without the light, he would be blind and the city would be vulnerable. He thought about the people sleeping in the houses surrounding the square. They trusted him to be their eyes in the dark. It was a solemn duty, one he did not take lightly. He checked the time by the position of the moon, estimating the hour. It was past midnight, the deepest part of the night when sleep is heaviest. This was the time when dangers were most likely to arise, hidden by the darkness. He remained vigilant, his senses sharp despite the fatigue creeping into his bones. The cobblestones under his feet were uneven. Worn by centuries of footsteps, he navigated them carefully, knowing every dip and rise. A loose stone could trip him, and he could not afford to fall. The lantern was made of glass and iron, fragile yet durable. He treated it with care, wiping the soot from the glass with a cloth. The light grew brighter, cutting through the gloom with renewed clarity. He moved toward the edge of the square, where the streets branched out. One path led to the river, where the sounds of water lapping against the docks could be heard. The other led deeper into the residential district, where the houses were closer together. He chose the residential path, knowing that was where most people lived. The shadows here were thicker, cast by the overhanging upper stories of the buildings. He walked slowly, scanning the doors and windows for any sign of forced entry. Everything seemed secure, the locks holding firm against the night. He paused to listen again, hearing the distant sound of a bell. The distant sound of a bell marked the hour, tolling slowly from the church tower. The vibration traveled through the air, a deep resonance that he felt in his chest. It was a signal to the city that time was passing, even in the dark. He counted the chimes silently, confirming that it was 1 o'clock. He had been walking for several hours, yet the night stretched out before him. The bell faded into the silence, leaving the quiet once more. He turned a corner, entering a street lined with tall townhouses. The windows were dark, the inhabitants lost in dreams. He imagined the warmth inside, the fires burning in the hearths. It was tempting to envy them, but he knew his place was outside. He walked with a steady rhythm, the sound of his boots consistent and reassuring. A shutter creaked in the wind, and he stopped instantly to investigate. He waited, holding the lantern high, watching the window closely. The shutter settled, the noise ceasing as the wind died down. He exhaled slowly, releasing the tension in his shoulders. It was a false alarm, a common occurrence in the old buildings. He noted the house in his mind, ensuring he would check it again later. Vigilance required attention to detail, noticing the small changes in the environment. He continued on, passing a tavern that was still open for late drinkers. The light from within spilled onto the street, brighter than his lantern. He could hear the murmur of voices, low and relaxed. He did not interfere, as the tavern was licensed to stay open. His job was to watch for disorder, not to prevent lawful gathering. He saw the shadow of the keeper through the window, watching the patrons. Everything was calm, the drinkers behaving themselves. He moved past the tavern, the warmth of the place fading behind him. The street became darker again, the shadows lengthening. He felt the cold more acutely now, the initial warmth of his walk wearing off. He stopped to adjust his scarf, wrapping it tighter around his neck. The wool was rough against his skin, but it kept the wind out. He looked up at the sky, seeing the clouds shifting across the moon. The light varied, dimming and brightening as the clouds passed. It created a dynamic landscape of light and shadow on the street. He watched the patterns move, finding a strange beauty in the darkness. The city was alive in its own way, breathing in the night. He heard the sound of footsteps approaching from the other end of the street. He raised the lantern, signaling his presence to the stranger. The figure stopped, recognizing the light of the watch. It was another worker, a carrier moving goods before the market opened. They nodded to each other, two ghosts passing in the night. The carrier moved on, his cart wheels rumbling softly on the stone. The sound faded, leaving the watchman alone again. He checked the locks on the nearby doors, ensuring they were secure. All was well, the neighborhood safe under his watch. He turned to continue his route, seeing the glow of a baker's oven. The glow of a baker's oven warmed the corner, where he stood for a moment. He allowed himself a brief respite, letting the heat seep into his frozen hands. The baker offered him a small loaf, fresh from the fire, wrapped in cloth. He accepted it with a nod of gratitude, tucking it into his coat. It would be his sustenance for the rest of the shift, a simple meal in the cold. He thanked the baker quietly, not wanting to disturb the peace of the street. The baker returned to his work, the rhythm of kneading dough continuing inside. The watchman stepped back into the cold, the warmth of the oven lingering on his skin. He walked on, the bread providing a small comfort in his pocket. The street widened again, leading toward the main thoroughfare. Here the buildings were larger, belonging to merchants and guild members. The doors were heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. He checked each one, testing the handle to ensure it was locked. The iron was cold, biting at his gloved fingers through the leather. He moved methodically, leaving no door unchecked. The routine was meditative, a series of actions performed without thought. His mind was calm, focused only on the task at hand. The city sat around him, a vast organism resting in the dark. He was the immune system, patrolling the veins of the streets. He heard the rustle of paper in the wind, a poster loose on a wall. He smoothed it down, pressing it against the brick. It was a proclamation from the mayor, reminding citizens of the curfew. He respected the law, upholding it with his presence. He walked past the guild hall, its large windows dark and empty. The symbols of the trades were carved into the stone above the door. He recognized the marks of the weavers and the smiths. They were all asleep, their tools silent for the night. He felt a connection to them, all part of the same city body. The wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the buildings. He pulled his coat tighter, shielding himself from the gust. The lantern flame dipped low, but he protected it with his hand. He could not let the light go out. Not while he was on duty. He walked faster now, trying to generate heat through movement. The cobblestone seemed slicker, the mist turning to light rain. He felt the drops on his face, cold and sharp. He ignored the discomfort, focusing on the path ahead. The rain made the streets shine, reflecting the lantern light like a mirror. He watched his own reflection in the puddles, a distorted figure moving through the night. The sky began to lighten with a pale grey. The sky began to lighten with a pale grey as the night approached its end. The stars faded one by one, swallowed by the growing dawn. The air felt different, less sharp, as the sun prepared to rise. He had walked the entire city, covering miles of stone and dirt. His legs ached with the effort, but he did not stop. The shift was nearly over, but the duty remained until the relief arrived. He walked toward the church, the central point of his route. The building loomed above him, a silhouette against the brightening sky. The spire reached up, piercing the clouds like a needle. He stood in the shadow of the church spire, waiting for the change. The cold was less biting now, the warmth of the day returning. He could see the details of the street clearly, without the lantern. The colors of the buildings emerged, from the monochrome of the night. The red brick, the grey stone, the brown wood. The city was waking up, though few people were yet visible. A bird sang in the tree above him, a cheerful sound after the silence. He smiled faintly, appreciating the return of life. He checked his pocket watch, a rare luxury for a man of his station. It was almost 6 o'clock, the time for the morning shift. He polished the glass of the lantern, cleaning off the soot and rain. He would hand it over in good condition, ready for the next watcher. He stood still, listening to the sounds of the morning. Carts began to rumble in the distance, heading to the market. The smell of fresh bread grew stronger as more ovens lit up. The city was stirring, shaking off the sleep of the night. He felt a sense of accomplishment, having kept the peace until dawn. No fires, no burglaries, no disturbances. The night had been quiet, a gift he accepted with humility. He leaned against the wall of the church, resting his weary legs. The stone was cool, but not freezing like the iron of the night. He closed his eyes for a moment, enjoying the stillness. The shadow of the church spire stretched across the square. The shadow of the church spire stretched across the square as the sun climbed higher. The light was golden now, warming the stone beneath his feet. He saw the relief watchman approaching from the east, lantern in hand. The man looked fresh, rested from a night of sleep. They met in the center of the square, exchanging a quiet greeting. The morning shift arrived with a quiet nod, acknowledging the transfer of duty. The watchman handed over the lantern, the flame still burning steady. He also passed the key, the metal warm from his pocket. The relief watchman checked the light, ensuring it was sufficient. Satisfied, he tucked the key onto his own belt. They spoke briefly about the night, sharing any notable observations. There was little to report. A peaceful night for the city. The relief watchman turned to begin his own patrol, walking toward the market. The first watchman watched him go, his job now complete. He felt a sudden wave of fatigue, now that the tension was released. His body remembered the hours of walking and the cold exposure. He turned away from the square, heading toward his home. The streets were busier now, people moving about their daily tasks. He kept to the side, avoiding the flow of the morning crowd. He walked slowly, savoring the end of his labor. The sun was fully up, casting long shadows in the opposite direction. The city was alive, vibrant, and noisy after the quiet night. He missed the silence already, but he knew he needed rest. He reached his street, a narrow lane near the river. His house was small, but it was warm and safe. He unlocked the door, stepping into the quiet hallway. The smell of breakfast cooking drifted from the kitchen. His family was awake, starting their day as he ended his. He took off his coat, hanging it by the door. The wall was damp from the rain and mist. He rubbed his hands together, feeling the warmth of the house. He walked to the kitchen, where a plate of food waited for him. He ate slowly, enjoying the simple meal after the long shift. The warmth of the food spread through his body, chasing away the chill. He felt heavy with sleep, his eyes struggling to stay open. He finished eating and walked to the bedroom. The bed was made, the sheets clean and inviting. He sat on the edge, removing his boots. His feet were sore, but the relief was immediate. He lay down, pulling the covers over his body. The room was dark, the shutters closed against the morning light. He closed his eyes, letting the darkness take him. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by the rhythm of his breathing. He drifted off, the images of the night fading into dreams. He slept deeply, knowing the city was safe in other hands. The morning shift arrived with a quiet nod. As the sun warmed the stones. The watchman slept in the dark room, oblivious to the day outside. His breathing was slow and steady, his body recovering from the exertion. The house was quiet, his family moving softly to avoid waking him. They understood the sacrifice of the night, the labor done in darkness. They respected his rest, keeping the noise to a minimum. The sunlight filtered through the cracks in the shutters, drawing lines on the floor. Dust motes danced in the beams, similar to those in the lantern light. He dreamed of the streets, walking endlessly through the quiet lanes. In the dream, the city was silent, and he was the only soul awake. He patrolled the shadows, ensuring everything remained in order. The dream was peaceful, lacking the cold of the real night. He slept on, the hours passing quickly in his unconscious state. The city continued its rhythm, the market bustling, the shops opening. He was disconnected from the day, existing in a different time zone. His body knew when to wake, tuned to the cycle of the shift. He would rise when the sun set, ready to work again. It was a life of inversion, living when others slept. He found purpose in it, a role that was vital and unique. The afternoon passed, the light shifting across the ceiling. He stirred slightly, turning over in the bed. The covers were warm, holding the heat of his body. He slept on, unaware of the time passing. The evening approached, the sky turning orange and purple. The sounds of the city changed, the market closing, the evening beginning. He began to wake, his senses returning slowly. He opened his eyes, seeing the dim light in the room. He stretched, feeling the muscles loosen after sleep. He sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He stood up, walking to the window to open the shutters. The evening air was cool, smelling of dinner and smoke. The sky was orange and purple, the sun setting behind the roofs. He watched for a moment, enjoying the view. Then he closed the shutters, preparing for the night. He lit the lantern, the flame casting a warm glow. He put on his cloak, fastening it to the neck. He was ready to return to the hall to start the shift. He opened the door, stepping into the corridor. The stairs were dark, the lantern lighting the way down. He descended slowly, the steps familiar under his feet. He reached the ground floor, walking toward the street. The door was closed, the silence waiting inside. He opened it, stepping into the vast space. The city was there, just as he left it. The streets were clean, ready for the watch. He walked to his post, placing the lantern down. He lit the candle, the flame flickering to life. He stood ready, preparing for the night. The cycle began. The duty called him again. He checked the key, the metal dark and ready. He walked the first line, the story continuing. The street was silent, the shadows long. He was back where he belonged, in the quiet. He walked on, the night stretching before him. The cycle repeated, the duty remained. He was a worker in the quiet street, a keeper of the light. He walked on, into the darkness. The city waited, the safety needed preserving. He was the one who did it, the guardian of the night. He walked on, with focus and care. The night was his, the street was his. He worked on until the morning came. The candle burned, the light flowed. He walked on, into the deep night. The silence was his friend, the darkness his ally. He created safety in the quiet, value in the stillness. He walked on until the end. The night would end, but the work would remain. He was building something eternal, something that would last. He walked on, with hope and dedication. The city watched him, silent and proud. He was a worker in the quiet street, a guardian of the past. He walked on, into the future. The story ends here, in the quiet peace of the morning.